Hey guys, tonight we are traveling to the ancient and magnificent world of Han Dynasty China. We're going to the heart of one of the most powerful and sophisticated empires on Earth, a civilization of incredible art, profound philosophy, and a bureaucracy so complex it would make modern governments weep. It was a world built on order, on balance, and on the belief that a virtuous ruler could command the harmony of both heaven and earth. But what happens when that harmony is shattered by an enemy that cannot be fought with armies or reasoned with through philosophy? An enemy that comes as a silent, invisible, and pestilential wind. Tonight, we're going to explore how one of the world's greatest ancient dynasties responded to a series of terrible epidemics. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't have survived it. Forget the plague itself. To get a respectable job in the Han government, you would first have to pass the grueling, multi-day civil service examinations. An ordeal where you were locked in a tiny stone cell and forced to write essays on Confucian philosophy and ancient poetry. And if you succeeded, your reward was a lifetime of paperwork. It was a different, but equally terrifying kind of misery. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a quiet and simple way to support the channel. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where and when you're tuning in from. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always a little fascinating to see our community of history lovers spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is a world of ink, silk, and the dry, earthy smell of bamboo. You are a junior scholar official, a very small but proud cog in the vast, intricate, and magnificent machine that is the government of the great Han Dynasty. The year's 179 AD, and you serve the Son of Heaven, the Emperor Ling, in the grand imperial capital of Luoyang. You have earned your place here. You spent years of your youth hunched over classical texts, memorizing the wisdom of Confucius, the histories of the former Han, the subtle poetry of the odes. You passed the grueling examinations, a trial of scholarship and endurance that is the only path to a respectable position in the imperial bureaucracy. And your reward is this: a small, clean office in the Ministry of Rites, a silk robe appropriate to your minor rank, and a steady supply of ink, brushes, and bamboo slips. Luoyang is the center of the civilized world. It is a vast, sprawling city, surrounded by great, thick walls of rammed earth. Its streets are a marvel of imperial planning, a grid of wide avenues and smaller lanes, all teeming with life. The city is a riot of sound and color. You hear the rumble of ox carts, the shouts of merchants in the great markets, the chanting of Buddhist monks in their newly established temples, the sharp commands of the Imperial Guard in their lacquered armor. The air smells of cooking fires, of exotic spices from the far-off Silk Road, of the incense that burns day and night in the countless temples and shrines. Your life is one of quiet, ordered, and sometimes mind-numbingly tedious. Routine. Your job is to read, to copy, and to file. You are a bureaucrat. You do not work with paper, which is a rare and expensive luxury. You work with the primary medium of your government bamboo. Your days are spent handling reports that arrive from the distant provinces of the empire. They come in the form of heavy, rolled-up bundles of thin bamboo slips, each slip no wider than your thumb, held together by silken cords. This is an obscure but fundamental detail of your world. To read a report, you must unroll the bundle of slips and read the columns of black characters, painted on the smooth bamboo with a fine brush. It is the ancient equivalent of scrolling through a very long and very important email. You spend your day composing a memorandum on the proper ceremony for the winter solstice. The work is incredibly important for the stability of the cosmos, and it is also soul-crushingly boring. The entire world you inhabit, from the emperor on his dragon throne down to the lowliest peasant in his rice paddy, is governed by a single, powerful idea. It is the core political and religious fact of your civilization. It is the mandate of heaven, the Chen Ming. The emperor is the son of heaven, and he rules not by mere force of arms, but because he has been granted a divine mandate, a cosmic permission slip to govern the world of men. This mandate, however, is not permanent. Heaven grants it to a just and virtuous ruler, and to a dynasty that maintains order and harmony in the world. When the emperor rules wisely, when he performs the correct rituals at the correct times, the world will be in balance. The rains will come when they should. The harvest will be plentiful, and the people will be prosperous and content. But if the ruler becomes corrupt, inept, or wicked, heaven will show its displeasure, and it shows its displeasure through omens, earthquakes, floods, droughts, famines, comets appearing in the sky. These are not natural disasters, they are warnings. They are signs that the emperor is losing the mandate of heaven. And the most terrifying and unambiguous of all these signs is pestilence. A great plague is not just a medical crisis. It is a political crisis. It is a spiritual crisis. It is a sign that heaven itself is withdrawing its favor from the dynasty. For now, the Han Dynasty, which has ruled for nearly 400 years, still holds the mandate. The world feels stable, eternal, and secure. But you, from your small desk in the heart of the bureaucracy, can see the cracks beginning to form. You read the secret memorials sent from provincial governors, reports not meant for public consumption. You read of rising taxes, of peasant unrest, of growing banditry in the countryside, and you see the corruption in the capital itself. You see the immense and growing power of the court eunuchs, who control access to the emperor and who sell offices and influence to the highest bidder. You see the great, powerful clans, the families of the empresses and the imperial consorts, jockeying for power, their rivalries a source of constant instability. The great men of the court seem more interested in their own wealth and power than in the good of the empire. This is the great debate that future historians will have about your time. Was the later Han Dynasty a strong and stable power, brought down by a series of unprecedented and unavoidable catastrophes? Or was it already a decadent, corrupt, and hollowed-out institution, a great, rotten tree, merely waiting for the first strong wind to push it over? You do not have the perspective of a historian. You only have a quiet, growing sense of unease. One hot, humid afternoon in late summer, your quiet routine is interrupted by the arrival of a messenger. He is a courier from the southern province of Jing, a land of rivers and lakes, far from the capital. He brings a bundle of bamboo slips for your ministry. It is the provincial governor's regular report on the state of the harvest and the collection of taxes. It is your job to read it and to prepare a summary for your superiors. You unroll the heavy bundle on your desk. You begin to read, your brush and ink ready to take notes. The report is, like most such reports, long, formal, and filled with flattering praise for the emperor's wisdom and the benevolence of his rule. The harvest has been adequate. The taxes have been collected. You are about to roll the report back up and file it away. But then you see, at the very end of the last bamboo slip, a short, almost casual addendum. It is written as if it is an afterthought, a minor detail not worthy of great concern. The governor reports that in a few remote districts along the Great River, there has been a small outbreak of a seasonal affliction. He uses the term li kui, or pestilential kui, a kind of unhealthy vapor or malignant atmospheric influence. He reports that it has caused a number of deaths in a few villages, but that the local magistrates have the situation well in hand. He assures the court that it is a minor matter, and that the proper local sacrifices are being made. You read the short passage line, and you think nothing of it. Fevers and local sicknesses are a common feature of life, especially in the hot, damp south. It is a minor, local problem. 1,000 miles away, it is a piece of routine bureaucratic paperwork. You carefully roll up the bundle of bamboo slips. You tie the silk cord around it, and you place it on the shelf with the hundreds of other reports from the southern provinces. You turn your attention back to your own work, to your memorandum on the proper placement of ceremonial vessels for the autumn equinox. You do not know it, but you have just read the first official report of the Great Plague that will shatter the Han Dynasty. You have just held in your hands the first, faint tremor of the earthquake that will bring your entire world crashing down. The memory of the lone bamboo slip with its casual mention of a seasonal affliction fades into the vast, dusty archive of your memory. The machinery of the Han government is immense, and your small cog continues to turn. You spend your days copying edicts, drafting responses to provincial governors, and ensuring that the complex ceremonial life of the imperial court is precisely documented. The world is stable. The seasons turn as they should, and the empire, from your vantage point in the heart of Luoyang, feels eternal. The autumn gives way to a mild winter. It is during the quiet, cold months that the whispers from the south return. They arrive, as they did before, in the form of official reports, delivered to your ministry by couriers who have traveled for weeks on the imperial post roads. But this time, the whispers are louder. You are tasked with summarizing a new bundle of slips from the same southern province. The governor's tone is different now. The plague, the leaky, is no longer a minor addendum at the end of his report. It is the first and most urgent item of business. He reports that the injurious vapor has spread from a few remote villages to 3 entire commanderies. He writes of local officials falling sick at their posts, of tax collection grinding to a halt. He is no longer just reporting a local problem. He is asking for help. He is requesting an imperial tax deferment for the afflicted regions. This is the first time you feel a genuine sense of alarm. A request for tax relief is a serious matter. It is an official admission that the local administration can no longer cope, that the fabric of imperial order is beginning to tear. You pass the report to your superior, a senior official named Lord Wei. He reads it, his brow furrowed. He does not panic. He is a man who has spent 30 years in the bureaucracy. He has seen floods, droughts, and bandit uprisings. He sees this as another problem to be managed. Draft a memorandum, he tells you. We will forward it to the Grand Secretariat. They must be made aware of the potential impact on the grain tithe. His primary concern is not the loss of life, but the loss of revenue. But then, another report arrives. This one is from a neighboring province, further up the great Yangtze River. It speaks of the same sickness. A high fever, a sore throat, a rash of angry red pustules, and a swift, almost certain, death. Then a report from a third province. The same story. You begin to keep a small, secret map of your own, scratched onto a spare wooden tablet. You mark each commandery, each province that sends a report of the pestilence. Over the course of the winter, you watch as your small, scattered marks begin to join together, forming a great ugly stain that is slowly, relentlessly, spreading northward, up the great river valleys, along the empire's arteries of trade and communication. The language of the reports is a study in bureaucratic euphemism. The governors are careful. They know that to report a disaster in their province can be seen as a reflection of their own incompetence, a sign that their own administration has lost the favor of heaven. So they write of unseasonable vapors, of a great shivering sickness, of a malignant climatic influence. But the numbers they are forced to report tell the true story. 30,000 households in the Nanyang Commandery are unable to remit their taxes due to the affliction. The public granaries in Changsha are sealed, as the granary keeper and his entire family have perished. The polite, formal language of your government is a thin veil over a horrifying reality. You begin to hear other explanations for the plague. The court astrologers are consulted. They report that a recent alignment of the planets was deeply inauspicious. creating a cosmic imbalance that has allowed a corrupting influence to enter the world. It's a great relief. You think with a dark, private humor. To know that the apocalypse has a sound astronomical basis. Other reports from the provinces offer their own theories. Reflecting the local beliefs, a governor from the jungle-filled south writes that the plague is a poisonous fog that has risen from the swamps. Another, a devout Confucian, writes a long and philosophical treatise blaming the sickness on a decline in filial piety and a lack of respect for the ancestors. This is the great debate of your time, played out in bamboo and ink. What is the source of this evil? Is it an imbalance in the heavens, a poison in the earth, a failing in the morality of men? The idea that it could be a tiny, living thing, an entity that is passed from person to person, is a concept that does not yet exist. The enemy is a miasma, a vapor, a form of corrupt qui, and it is as mysterious and as uncontrollable as the wind, by the spring. The pestilence is no longer a distant problem in the south. It is the only topic of conversation in the tea houses and wine shops of Luoyang. Merchants and travelers arriving from the south bring not goods, but stories. Stories of entire villages wiped out, of unburied dead lining the roads, of a sickness that kills with a speed and ferocity that seems supernatural. The whispers in the capital are now a roar of fear. Your own workload increases dramatically. You are now the ministry's unofficial expert on what is becoming known as the Great Pestilence. You read every report. You update your secret map. The dark stain is now covering a vast portion of the Southern Empire, and it is creeping steadily closer to the capital itself. You become an expert in the disease. At least on paper. You have never seen a victim, but you can describe the symptoms in detail. As reported by the provincial doctors, you learn of the high fever, the headache, the sore throat. You learn of the rash of pustules that covers the body from the descriptions. Future historians will identify this disease as a particularly virulent strain of smallpox, a disease to which your people have little to no immunity. You also read of a second, even swifter sickness, one that involves a high fever and a bloody flux. What is likely epidemic dysentery, which now travels in the wake of the first plague. Feasting on the weakened survivors, you read of the desperate and mostly useless attempts by local physicians to combat the disease. They use the ancient arts of acupuncture and moxibustion. They prescribe complex and foul-tasting herbal teas, designed to rebalance the body's ki and expel the evil vapors. You even read one obscure report of a local physician in a remote village attempting a desperate ancient folk remedy, a form of inoculation called variolation, where the powdered scabs from a sick person are blown into the nose of a healthy one, in the hopes of producing a milder, survivable form of the disease. The report does not mention if it was successful. The crisis has now become too large for even the bureaucracy to ignore. The reports are no longer just about tax revenues. They are about the very stability of the empire. The final, terrifying report arrives on a hot summer afternoon. It is not from a distant southern province. It is from the commandery of Hanai, just across the Yellow River, less than a week's journey from the capital. The governor of Hanai does not use the careful, placating language of his southern colleagues. His report, written on a scroll of silk, not bamboo, a sign of its extreme urgency, is a frantic plea for help. His language is stark, stripped of all bureaucratic politeness. He writes, "More than half of my people are dead. The magistrates have fled or have perished. The dead lie unburied in the streets. The fields are untilled. There is chaos in the city. We have lost the mandate of heaven." The last sentence is a thunderclap. For a high-ranking official to write such a thing, to openly question the divine favor of the emperor, is an act of profound desperation, bordering on treason. You take the silk scroll to your superior. Lord Wei. He reads it, and for the first time, you see the mask of calm, bureaucratic detachment fall from his face. You see a flicker of real, personal fear in his eyes. The pestilence is no longer a problem for the southern provinces. It is no longer a set of numbers in a ledger. It is here. It is at the gates of the capital. It is threatening the Son of Heaven himself. Lord Wei rushes from the office, the silk scroll in his hand. On his way to the inner sanctums of the imperial palace, the time for paperwork, for memorandums, for quiet. Scholarly debate is over. You go to the window of your office and you look out over the bustling, magnificent city of Luoyang. You look towards the great, soaring rooftops of the imperial palace, and you see a new kind of activity. A great procession is beginning to form. You see the imperial guards in their glittering armor. You see the court eunuchs in their fine silks. You see the high priests of the imperial cult, dressed in their elaborate ceremonial robes. The procession is heading towards the great altar of heaven, the most sacred place in the empire. The emperor himself is about to intervene. He is about to confront this great crisis not with medicine or with quarantines, but with the most powerful weapon in his arsenal ritual. He is going to speak directly to the heavens. He is going to perform the great sacrifices designed to restore the cosmic balance and to prove to the world and to himself that he has not lost the mandate of heaven. The response to the plague is about to become a great and solemn imperial ceremony. The silk scroll from the governor of Hanai is a firebrand thrown into the heart of the imperial government. The careful, bureaucratic language of your ministry, with its talk of seasonal afflictions and unhealthy vapors, is burned away, replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of a province in a state of collapse. The pestilence is no longer a distant problem to be managed with tax deferments and memorandums. It is at the gates of the capital itself, the response from the Son of Heaven. The Emperor Ling is swift, and it is profoundly, majestically, and, you fear uselessly, religious. You stand as a minor functionary in the vast, watching crowd of officials as the great procession makes its way from the imperial palace to the altar of heaven, the most sacred site in the empire, located in the southern suburbs of Luoyang. The spectacle is one of overwhelming power and solemnity. Hundreds of imperial guards in their polished black lacquer armor provide a silent, intimidating corridor. They are followed by the court musicians, playing ancient, deep, and mournful melodies on bells, chimes, and zithers. Then come the high officials of the court, the lords and ministers. Their silk robes a rainbow of prescribed ceremonial colors. You see the powerful eunuchs, their faces smooth and impassive, their influence a palpable, silent force in the court. And finally, you see the emperor himself. He is not in his usual grand chariot. Today, he is a penitent. He rides in a simple, unadorned cart, and he wears a plain, coarse robe, his hair unbound, signs of his humility before the power of heaven. He is the Son of Heaven, but he is a son who is about to be rebuked by his father. The procession reaches the great altar of heaven, a magnificent, multi-tiered circular mound built of white marble, designed to represent the connection between the earth and the heavens. Here, under the open sky, the emperor himself will perform the great sacrifices, a direct appeal to the cosmic forces to restore the harmony that has been so terribly broken. You watch from a distance as the complex and ancient rituals unfold. You see the perfect, unblemished white oxen being led to the slaughter, their blood a sacred offering to appease the angry gods. You see great bolts of the finest silk, inscribed jade tablets, and vessels filled with precious wine being placed on the altar and then burned. The smoke carrying the emperor's plea up to the heavens. The emperor himself, his face a mask of solemn gravity, kneels on the highest tier of the altar and reads aloud a prayer that has been carefully drafted by your own Ministry of Rights. It is a prayer of confession, of apology. He takes the blame for the pestilence upon himself. He speaks of his own lack of virtue, of his failure to govern with perfect wisdom, of the corruption of his officials. It is a piece of magnificent political theater, a common and necessary act for a Confucian ruler in a time of crisis. By accepting the blame, He is demonstrating his piety and his worthiness, showing heaven that he understands its displeasure and is prepared to atone. The next day, the results of this great ceremony are felt throughout the bureaucracy. A new imperial edict is issued. You and every other scribe in your ministry are put to work, making copies of it to be dispatched to every province in the empire. The edict is a masterpiece of imperial public relations. It begins with the emperor's own flowery, self-deprecating confession, the very words you heard him speak at the altar, but while the emperor blames himself in public. The edict makes it clear that the court is also looking for more tangible scapegoats. Several high-ranking provincial officials from the hardest-hit regions are dismissed from their posts for inefficiency and failing to report the true nature of the calamity to the throne. It is a comprehensive approach to problem-solving. The emperor takes the spiritual blame, while a few unlucky governors take the practical fall. The edict also contains acts of imperial benevolence, designed to soothe the people and restore harmony. A general amnesty is declared for many minor criminals. Taxes are officially deferred for all the plague-stricken districts, and the emperor commands that the public granaries be open to provide food for the afflicted. These are all good, sound, traditional responses to a disaster. They are the actions of a government that is trying, with the tools it has, to restore order. But as you sit at your desk, carefully painting the characters of the edict onto one bamboo slip after another, you cannot shake a feeling of profound futility. Your desk is still piling up with the daily reports from the provinces, and these reports tell a different story. They are no longer just from the south. The pestilence is now being reported in the east, along the great coastal plains, and it is raging in the west, along the trade routes of the Silk Road, and, most terrifyingly, it is getting worse in the areas immediately surrounding the capital. The governor of a nearby district writes that so many of his peasants have died that there is no one left to bring in the harvest, and that the fields are full of unburied dead. The emperor has prayed for rain, so to speak, but the fire continues to spread. This is the great, central debate of your civilization in this moment, a debate that will define the fall of your dynasty. Can a plague, a great natural disaster, be stopped by a ritual? Is it truly a matter of cosmic balance? Of the emperor's virtue, or is it something else? A physical force of nature that is completely indifferent to the prayers of kings and the confessions of emperors. Historians of the future will look back and debate the function of these grand imperial ceremonies. Were they genuine acts of religious belief? Or were they primarily acts of political theater, designed to reassure a terrified populace that their ruler was still in control, that he still possessed the mandate of heaven, and thereby to stave off the social and political chaos that always follows in the wake of a great plague? You, a man who reads the grim, daily reality in the provincial reports, are beginning to suspect it is the latter. In the weeks that follow the great sacrifice, the mood in the capital is one of tense, hopeful waiting. The court's physicians and astrologers are in constant consultation. You are asked to prepare summaries of historical texts, searching for accounts of how the great emperors of the past dealt with similar pestilences. You read stories of ancient plagues that were stopped by the virtuous actions of a wise ruler. The stories are meant to be reassuring, but they feel like fairy tales. Your own life is governed by a new kind of fear. The capital city of Luoyang, which once felt like the most secure and vibrant place in the world, now feels like a trap. The city gates are still open, but the flow of traffic has slowed to a trickle. Every traveler, every merchant, is looked upon with suspicion. Is he carrying the pestilence? And then it happens. The thing everyone has been dreading? A report comes not from a provincial governor, but from the captain of the city guard at the eastern gate of Luoyang itself. He reports that 3 of his own guards, men who inspect the carts and the travelers coming into the city, have fallen ill with the now familiar, terrifying symptoms: a high fever, a sore throat, and the dreaded rash of blackish-red pustules. The pestilential qi, the injurious vapor, has not been appeased by the emperor's sacrifices. It has not been halted by the city walls. It is inside the capital. The news spreads through the city, not like a rumor, but like a flash of lightning. The fragile, hopeful calm that followed the emperor's ceremonies is shattered. A real, palpable panic takes hold. The wealthy and the powerful, who had remained in the city, trusting in the emperor's power, now begin to flee, their carriages clogging the western and northern gates, the ones that lead away from the infected eastern quarter. The great imperial rituals have failed. The cosmic solution has proven to be no solution at all. The mandate of heaven is looking increasingly shaky. You stand at the window of your ministry office, looking out at the city, but you no longer see a city of order and power. You see a city that is holding its breath, waiting for the sickness to consume it. The problem is no longer a matter for the Ministry of Rites. It is no longer a matter for the priests and the astrologers. It is now a matter for the physicians. It is time for the men who understand the human body, not the cosmos, to try and fight this enemy. And you have a terrible, sinking feeling that their own brand of science will prove to be just as helpless as the Emperor's prayers. The Emperor's grand ceremony at the altar of heaven, with its solemn prayers and its mountains of burnt offerings, has failed. The pestilence, unimpressed by the Emperor's display of humility, has not been appeased. The arrival of the plague within the very walls of the capital city of Luoyang marks the end of the cosmic response and the beginning of the medical one. The priests and the astrologers retreat to their temples. It is now the time of the physicians. Your role in the great bureaucracy shifts. Your skill with the written word and your now extensive knowledge of the plague reports from across the empire have made you a valuable asset. You are reassigned from the Ministry of Rites to the Imperial Medical College. Your new, miserable task is to act as a scribe and liaison for the team of elite physicians who have been tasked by the Emperor with finding a way to combat the great pestilence. You have gone from documenting a disaster to being at the very heart of the attempt to fight it. This is your introduction to the sophisticated, complex, and deeply philosophical world of ancient Chinese medicine. You, a scholar of the Confucian classics, must now learn a new language, a new way of seeing the world and the human body. You are brought before the master physicians of the court. They are old men with long, thin beards and eyes that hold a deep, quiet wisdom. They are not like the arrogant, combative physicians you have read about in tales from the distant Roman Empire. Theirs is not a science of bold, heroic intervention, of bleeding and purging. It is a science of subtlety, of balance, of harmony. Your new master is a physician named Lord Tan, a man renowned for his diagnostic skill. He begins your education. He explains that the Western concepts of solid organs and mechanical functions are a crude and simplistic way of understanding the body. The body, he teaches you, is not a machine. It is a garden, a microcosm of the universe itself. The foundation of all health, he explains, is qi. This is the fundamental life force, the vital energy that flows through the body, animating it, warming it. This qi flows along specific, invisible pathways called meridians, connecting all the parts of the body into a unified whole. Health is the smooth, unimpeded, and harmonious flow of qi. This flow is governed by the great cosmic principles of yin and yang. Yin is the principle of coolness, of darkness, of quiet, of femininity. Yang is the principle of heat, of light, of activity, of masculinity. A healthy body is one in which these two forces are in perfect, dynamic balance. Sickness, therefore, is a disruption. It is a blockage of the flow of qi. It is an imbalance between yin and yang, and an epidemic. A great pestilence like the one now ravaging the empire is understood as an invasion. It is an attack by an external hostile force. But this force is not a demon or a curse from a single, angry god. It is a force of nature. The physicians call it Li Qi, a pestilential or malignant qi. Think of it as a kind of evil wind. Lord Tan explains to you, his voice calm and measured. It is born of a great cosmic disharmony. Perhaps from the alignment of the stars, as the astrologers say. Perhaps from great geological events that release foul vapors from the earth. Or perhaps it is born from the decay of unburied bodies and the filth of war. This evil, hot, and toxic ki sweeps across the land like a storm. And if a person's own protective ki, their wei ki, is weak, this pestilential wind can invade their body and cause the great disharmony that we call the plague. This is the germ theory of your time. It is not a theory of tiny, living creatures. It is a theory of malevolent energies, of climatic forces, of a universe that has been knocked out of balance. It is a poetic diagnosis, but it is the foundation of all that follows. You are given a new, and often stomach-turning, assignment. You must accompany Lord Tan on his rounds as he visits the sick. A task made necessary because many of his own apprentices have themselves fallen ill. You go with him to the mansion of a high-ranking court official whose entire household has been struck down. You witness firsthand the diagnostic methods of your time, the famous 4 examinations. First, the looking. Lord Tan observes the patient with an intense, focused gaze. He looks at the color of the man's skin, the brightness of his eyes. He asks the man to stick out his tongue, and he studies its color, its texture, its coating, as if it were a map of the man's internal landscape. Second, the listening and the smelling. He listens to the sound of the patient's breathing, noting its speed and its depth. He leans close and he smells the man's breath. He smells his sweat, believing that the disease creates its own unique and revealing odors. Third, the asking. He asks a long and detailed series of questions about the nature of the fever, about the patient's thirst, his appetite, his dreams, and fourth, the most subtle and skilled art of all the feeling. He takes the patient's wrist, but he does not just feel for the speed and strength of the pulse. This is an obscure but central part of his diagnostic art. He uses 3 fingers, pressing at 3 different positions on the wrist, with different levels of pressure, each position, he explains to you later, corresponds to a different internal organ system. With his fingertips, he is not just counting the heartbeats, he is listening to the flow of qi through the man's entire body. He is reading the story of the disease as it is written on the river of the pulse. You watch his face as he does this, his eyes closed in deep concentration. He says he can feel the state of the man's liver, his spleen, his lungs, all from this one point of contact. You are not sure if this is true science or a kind of medical wizardry, but his confidence is absolute after a long, silent examination. He makes his diagnosis, a classic case. He declares, the pestilential qi has entered the body, creating an excess of heat toxin. It has overwhelmed the protective qi and is now boiling the blood and attacking the lungs. The diagnosis is made. Now, the treatment must be prescribed. But that is a matter for the herbalists, a subject for another day. You return to the Imperial Medical College, your head spinning with this new knowledge. You are given access to the great medical texts, the foundational documents of your profession. You read from the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, a book so ancient its origins are lost in myth. You read about the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, and how they correspond to the organs of the body and the seasons of the year. You read about the 12 primary meridians, the invisible channels through which the qi flows. The complexity is dizzying. You begin to understand that the practice of medicine in your world is not just a science, it is a philosophy. It is an attempt to see the human body as a perfect, small-scale reflection of the cosmos, and to treat its illnesses by restoring its harmony with the universe itself. Future historians will debate the nature of these ancient texts. Were they literal medical manuals, intended as practical guides for physicians, or were they primarily philosophical and cosmological treatises? where the descriptions of the body and its functions were elaborate metaphors for the well-ordered state. The harmonious society, and a balanced universe reading the dense, poetic, and often baffling passages. You suspect the answer is both. The official response to the plague, now that it is in the hands of the physicians, begins to take shape. It is a response based on their theory of pestilential qui. The first recommendation is for the public. Edicts are posted, based on the physician's advice. The people are instructed to maintain a tranquil spirit, as fear and anger are believed to disrupt the flow of Kwai and make one more susceptible to the invasion of the evil vapors. They are advised to rest, to avoid excessive labor. This is sound, if somewhat impractical. Advice in the middle of an apocalypse, but the physicians know that this is not enough. The pestilential Kwai must be fought directly. The heat toxin must be cooled and expelled from the body. And for that, they must turn to the great, ancient and powerful art of herbal medicine. Lord Tan summons you to his private workshop, a room filled with hundreds of small drawers, each filled with a different dried herb, root, or mineral. The smell is a powerful, earthy perfume. He tells you that your work as a liaison is over. Your new assignment is to assist him and the other imperial physicians in the most important task of all the formulation and preparation of a great, city-wide remedy, an herbal prescription powerful enough to fight the great pestilence. You are no longer just a scribe, a recorder of disaster. You are now to be an active participant in the fight. You have learned the theory of the enemy. Now, you will learn how to mix the potion that is meant to destroy it. Your new life as an apprentice in the Imperial Medical College is an immersion in a world of strange and powerful scents, and even stranger and more powerful theories. The failure of the Emperor's rituals has put the burden of saving the Empire squarely on the shoulders of the physicians, and you are now a small part of their desperate, scientific war against the pestilence. You work in the great Imperial Pharmacy, a vast hall that is a library of the natural world, instead of books. The walls are lined with thousands of small, meticulously labeled drawers. Each drawer contains a different, dried part of a plant, an animal, or a mineral. There are gnarled roots, fragrant flowers, brittle leaves, strange fungi, powdered minerals, and obscure ingredients like fossilized dragon bones and the cast-off skins of cicadas. The air is thick with the complex, earthy, and sometimes acrid smell of 1,000 different potential cures. Your master, the physician Lord Tan, and the other great doctors of the court, now engage in a continuous, urgent debate. They do not debate if the plague can be treated. Their confidence in their medical system is absolute. They only debate how. They argue about which specific combination of herbs will be most effective against this particular strain of pestilential qi. You listen, and you learn the principles of their art. The plague, they have diagnosed, is a heat toxin that has invaded the body. Therefore, the cure must be a formula that has a cooling nature. It must be a bitter tea that can clear the heat. Resolve the toxin and expel the evil qi from the body. Your days are now spent in the laborious process of preparing these complex herbal formulas. You are no longer a scribe, but an herbalist's assistant. You learn the delicate art of the pharmacist's scale, weighing out precise amounts of dozens of different ingredients. A pinch of this, a scoop of that. Dried honeysuckle flowers and forsythia fruit to clear the heat. Powdered gypsum, a mineral, to fight the high fever. Rhubarb root to purge the toxin from the bowels. Each ingredient has a specific purpose, a specific energy, a specific role in the great orchestrated battle for the body's balance. You spend hours grinding the ingredients with a heavy iron mortar and pestle. Then, the mixtures are taken to great clay pots, where they are simmered in water for hours, creating a thick, dark, and incredibly bitter tea. The smell of this brewing medicine fills the entire college, a smell of hope and of desperation. This is the birth of a medical system that will endure for 2,000 years. You are witnessing, firsthand, the codification of what will become traditional Chinese medicine. The great physicians of your era, men like the legendary Zhang Zhongjing, are at this very moment, in response to this very series of epidemics, writing the foundational texts of their profession, like the Shanghan Lun or On Cold Damage. They are turning the chaos of the plague into an ordered system of diagnosis and prescription. The physicians do not rely on herbs alone. You also witness them using their other great tools. You accompany Lord Tan to the bedside of a sick official, and you watch as he performs acupuncture. He takes out a set of fine bronze needles. With a calm, practiced hand, he inserts them into specific points on the man's body, a point on the hand between the thumb and forefinger, a point on the leg below the knee. He is not just poking the man with needles, he is accessing the great meridians, the invisible rivers of qi, and he is attempting to unblock the dams, to restore the flow, to allow the body's own vital energy to fight the invading pestilence. On another patient, you see him use moxibustion. He takes a small cone of dried mugwort, the herb known as moxa, places it on an acupuncture point on the patient's back, and lights it. It smolders slowly, like incense, creating a deep, penetrating heat that is meant to warm and invigorate the flow of qi. This is the full arsenal of your medicine herbs to rebalance the body's internal chemistry. Acupuncture to restore the flow of energy, and moxibustion to provide a healing heat. When the great vats of bitter tea are ready, you are tasked with helping to distribute it. Great cauldrons of the medicine are set up in public squares throughout the city of Luoyang. The people, their faces etched with fear, line up with their own clay cups to receive their daily dose of the government's cure. They drink the foul-tasting liquid with a desperate faith. For them, it is a sign that the emperor has not forgotten them, that the learned physicians are fighting on their behalf. But does it work? This is the great, heartbreaking question. You see, some people get better. A man with a raging fever finds that his temperature drops after a few days of drinking the tea. A woman with the beginnings of the rash finds that the pustules do not spread. These small victories are hailed as proof of the physician's skill. But you see far more failures than successes. For most people, especially those who have a severe case of the disease. The herbal tea does nothing. The plague is too virulent, too powerful. It is a wildfire, and the physician's remedies are but a small cup of water thrown against the inferno. The death toll in the city continues to rise. You are living at the heart of a great, eternal medical debate. Is this system of medicine you are practicing effective? Is it a true science? Based on thousands of years of empirical observation of the healing properties of plants? Or is it an elaborate, philosophical, and ultimately ineffective system of placebos? A way to give comfort and hope to the dying, but with no real power to alter the course of a truly virulent disease. You who are measuring out the herbs and watching the people die do not have the answer. You only have your doubts. The physicians themselves are not blind. They see that their remedies are failing to stop the tide. They see the death carts making their grim rounds through the city streets. Lord Tan, your master, grows more withdrawn, more thoughtful. His professional confidence is being shaken to its core. He and the other senior physicians come to a difficult and revolutionary conclusion. If they cannot cure the sickness in sufficient numbers, they must change their strategy. If they cannot defeat the enemy within a person's body, they must try to stop the enemy from spreading from person to person. This is a profound intellectual leap. It is a tacit admission that the disease is not just a pestilential qi that drifts on the wind and strikes at random. It is something that passes from one person to another. It is a contagion. The physicians go to the imperial court with a new, radical proposal. They petition the emperor for the authority and the resources to establish a new kind of institution in the city. They will be called Li Chuyuan, or isolation houses. They will be places where those who have contracted the sickness can be taken. To be cared for, yes, but more importantly, To be separated from the healthy population, it is a proposal for a state-sponsored city-wide quarantine. It is one of the first of its kind in the history of the world. The court, desperate for any solution, agrees. The emperor issues a new edict. The isolation houses will be built. Lord Tan summons you to his office. Your work in the pharmacy is over. You have a new assignment. You, with your scribe skills and your orderly mind, are tasked with helping the city magistrates survey the capital. You must find suitable locations for these new houses of pestilence. Empty government buildings, abandoned temples, deserted residential quarters. You have moved from being a simple bureaucrat to an apprentice herbalist, and now to a kind of public health official. Your education in the miserable reality of a great epidemic is continuing. You are about to become an architect of the city's attempt to build a wall between the living and the dead. The physicians of the Imperial Medical College, armed with their theories of pestilential qi and their prescriptions of cooling herbs, have declared war on the great pestilence. But the pestilence does not seem to have received the news of its impending defeat. The bitter teas are brewed and distributed by the gallon, yet the death toll in Luoyang continues its relentless, terrifying climb. The dead are now a common sight in the streets. At first, families would mourn their lost ones in private, but as the plague accelerates, the ancient rituals of burial begin to break down under the sheer weight of numbers. Carts, once used for hauling grain, now make their slow, grim rounds through the city, collecting the bodies of the dead to be taken to mass burial pits outside the city walls. Lord Tan and the other senior physicians are forced to confront a terrible truth. Their cures are not working, at least not well enough, and not quickly enough. The enemy is too swift, too powerful. They cannot save the sick, and so they must pivot to a new, more brutal, and more desperate strategy. They must save the city. You are present at the emergency council meeting where the new policy is forged. The physicians present their case to the emperor's chief ministers. Their logic is cold, clear, and unassailable. The pestilential qi, they explain, emanates from the sick themselves. It is a corrupting vapor that rises from their bodies, their breath, their very presence. Therefore, to save the healthy, the sick must be removed. They must be isolated. It is a revolutionary and ruthless idea. For centuries, the sick have been cared for by their families, in their own homes. The family unit is the sacred, unshakable bedrock of your Confucian world. The physicians are proposing to shatter that unit, to tear the sick from the arms of their loved ones, all for the sake of a greater civic good. The court, in its terror, agrees. The emperor issues a new edict, one that you yourself are tasked with copying onto dozens of bamboo slips. It is the harshest and most frightening edict of the plague year. It declares that any household where a person falls ill with the pestilence must immediately report it to the local magistrate. The sick individual will then be forcibly removed from their home and taken to a designated Lai Chu Yuan in an isolation house. Any family caught hiding a sick person will be severely punished, their property confiscated, their members conscripted into the army. Your job shifts once more. You are no longer just an apprentice herbalist. You are now an administrator of this new, terrible system. You are assigned to help the city magistrates identify and set up these isolation houses. Your search takes you through the increasingly empty city. You repurpose abandoned government buildings, their officials having fled to their country estates. You take over crumbling temples to forgotten gods. You commandeer entire blocks of deserted residential homes in the hardest hit quarters of the city. These become your Li Chu Yuan. They are not hospitals. They are not places of healing. They are warehouses for the dying. And then your most miserable task begins. You become the clerk for one of these houses. You sit at a makeshift desk near the entrance, your brush and ink before you, and you process the new arrivals. You are the gatekeeper to this house of sorrows. You witness the brutal reality of the new policy. You see the city guards, their faces covered with cloths, forcibly entering homes. You hear the screams of the families as a sick mother or a feverish child is dragged out into the street. They are brought to you in rough carts, their bodies already trembling with the fever, their eyes wide with the terror of being taken from their homes to die among strangers. You must record their names in your ledger. Wang Jai, wife of a carpenter. Lin Bao, son of a soldier. Each name is a small tragedy, a life reduced to a single entry in your book of the doomed, the government, in a gesture of imperial benevolence that also serves a practical public health purpose. Has authorized a burial subsidy. This is an obscure but surprisingly modern detail of the Han Dynasty's response. A small sum of money is given for each reported death to ensure that the family can afford a proper burial and that the body will not be abandoned in the street to fester and spread more pestilential qui. Part of your job is to keep a record of these subsidies, a grim accounting of the price of death. You look inside one of the isolation houses, and the sight is one of pure, concentrated misery. The rooms are crowded with straw pallets, each one occupied by a sick or dying person. The air is thick with the smell of sickness, of unwashed bodies, of herbal medicines, and of fear. A handful of physicians and their assistants move among the dying, offering what comfort they can, a sip of water, a dose of the bitter herbal tea, but they are hopelessly overwhelmed. The mortality rate in the Li Chuyuan is staggering. It is a place where people go to die. Its official purpose is isolation. Its practical function is extermination. And you, sitting at your desk, are the bureaucrat who manages the workflow of this factory of death. As you work, you grapple with the terrible ethics of what your government is doing. You see the cold logic of it. To save the city, the infected parts must be amputated, but you also see the human cost, the brutal tearing apart of families, the terror in the eyes of a child being taken from its mother. This is the eternal debate of public health in a time of plague. When does a necessary act of quarantine become an unforgivable violation of human dignity? You do not know. You only know that the work is slowly destroying your soul. The people of Luoyang are terrified. But they are not just terrified of the plague anymore. They are now terrified of you. They are terrified of the doctors, of the city guards, of the entire system that has been set up to help them. To admit that a loved one is sick is to have them taken away from you forever. And so, a new secret, an illegal economy begins to thrive in the city. The people start to hide their sick. They keep them in back rooms and cellars, their fevers and their moans muffled. When a person dies, they do not report it. They bribe a cart driver to take the body away in the dead of night and dispose of it secretly. Outside the city walls, a diagnosis of the plague has become a shameful secret to be hidden at all costs. You know this is happening. But your own ministry is now so overwhelmed with the official tide of death that it has no resources to hunt down the hidden cases. The system is breaking down. The jokes among you and the other low-level officials are a form of gallows humor to keep from going mad. You have a new title for your isolation house, the waiting room for the afterlife. You quip that the government is now providing 2 main services to its citizens: a bitter tea to drink while you are alive, and a small bag of coins after you're dead. It's the Empire's first and last cradle-to-grave social welfare program. The climax of this phase of the disaster comes not as a single event, but as a slow, dawning realization. The system has failed. The isolation houses are full to bursting. The death rate, even with the quarantines, is not slowing. The city is being hollowed out, its population dwindling, its spirit broken. The physicians, the great men of science, are as helpless as the priests were. You were at your desk late one night. The ledger open before you. The number of new admissions for the day is a staggering 300. The number of recorded deaths is even higher. The machine is consuming people faster than you can count them. And then you hear it. A new sound. From outside the city walls. It is a faint at first, a low rumble. But it is growing. It is the sound of a great multitude. of thousands upon thousands of human voices, shouting, chanting, roaring as one. You go to the city wall with a group of guards and you look out. In the torchlight, you see a vast army spreading across the plain. But they are not the disciplined soldiers of a rival warlord. They are peasants. They are farmers. Their faces are thin with hunger, but they are burning with a righteous, fanatical fury. And on their heads, they all wear a strip of yellow cloth. It is the army of the Yellow Way, the Yellow Turban Rebellion, a great messianic peasant uprising, fueled by years of famine, corruption, and now, the final, devastating blow of the Great Pestilence. Their leaders are faith healers, mystics who claim that the plague is a punishment for the corruption of the Han, and that they alone possess the magical charms and the divine mandate to heal the people and usher in a new age of great peace. You stand on the wall of Luoyang, looking down at the sea of yellow scarves. You are a man in a city that is being consumed by a plague from within. And now, a new kind of plague, a plague of rebellion, of apocalyptic fury, has arrived at your gates. The Han Dynasty is being attacked by pestilence from within, and by revolution from without. You know, with a sudden terrible clarity, that the dynasty is doomed, its mandate from heaven has been well and truly lost. You stand on the high, rammed earth walls of Luoyang, looking out at a scene from a fever dream. The city behind you is a great, open ward, its streets filled with the quiet, shuffling misery of the pestilence. The isolation houses are overflowing. The daily dead cart is the only reliable municipal service left. But the horror within the walls is now mirrored by a new, more volatile horror without. The great plain before the city is a sea of people, a vast, disorganized, and terrifyingly large army of peasants. Their heads all wrapped in a distinctive strip of yellow cloth. They are the Yellow Turbans. They are a plague of a different sort, a plague of desperation, of apocalyptic faith, and of revolutionary fury. And they have come to claim the capital. Your world, already a nightmare, has just found a new, lower level of hell. You are now a citizen in a city that is simultaneously being consumed by a pestilence from within and besieged by a holy war from without. You do not understand this rebellion with your scholar's mind, which is trained in the orderly precepts of Confucianism. But you understand it with your gut. You have read the reports from the provinces for years. You have read about the famines, the floods, the corrupt officials, the crushing taxes that have pushed the peasantry to the brink. And you have seen how the great pestilence was the final, unbearable blow. The leaders of this great peasant army are not generals or nobles. They are the Zhang brothers, 3 Taoist mystics and faith healers. They have capitalized on the despair of the populace. They have told the peasants that the plagues and the famines are a clear sign that the Han Emperor has lost the mandate of heaven. The blue sky of the Han is dead. They preach. And the yellow sky of their own new age of great peace is about to dawn. And they offer something that your emperor's rituals and your physician's bitter teas could not. They offer a cure from the city walls. You watch their strange rituals. You see their leaders distributing magic water to their followers. Water that has been consecrated with the ashes of a burned talisman. A slip of paper with mystical characters painted on it. This, they claim, can cure the plague. They preach that a confession of sins and a deep faith in their coming victory is the only true medicine, in a world where the official remedies have so spectacularly failed. This message of magical spiritual healing is intoxicatingly powerful. It has drawn hundreds of thousands of desperate peasants to their yellow banner. The debate among future historians will be a complex one. Was the Yellow Turban Rebellion a simple, desperate uprising of starving peasants? A primal scream of rage against a collapsing state? Or was it a more complex and organized religious movement? A messianic cult that had been building for years and simply used the chaos of the plagues as the catalyst for its long-planned revolution, standing on the wall, looking down at their fervent, organized ranks. You suspect the latter, inside Luoyang. The arrival of the rebel army brings a new kind of terror. The city gates are sealed shut, not to keep the plague from spreading out, but to keep the rebellion from getting in. The city is now well and truly a prison. The flow of food from the countryside, already disrupted, now ceases completely. The hunger in the city, which was already a serious problem, now deepens into a true famine. The court, already paralyzed by the plague, is now gripped by a new paranoia. A witch hunt begins for any suspected rebel sympathizers within the city. The eunuchs, who hold immense power over the weak Emperor Ling, use the crisis to eliminate their political rivals. Accusations are leveled. Officials are arrested and executed on the flimsiest of pretenses. The government is not fighting the enemy outside, it is consuming itself from within. Your own life becomes a quiet study in survival. Your work at the isolation center is now largely pointless. There are no new supplies, no new physicians. You are simply managing the dying in a city that is itself dying. You do what you can. You offer a sip of water. You record the names in your ledger. But the great bureaucratic machine you once served has ground to a halt. The dark humor of your situation is not lost on you. The rebels outside are offering a cure of magic water. The physicians inside have offered a cure of bitter herbs. You've seen the results of both, and you suspect the magic water is probably just as effective, and likely tastes better. The city is suffering from a plague, a famine, and a siege by a revolutionary army. You feel it is only missing a flood, and perhaps the sudden appearance of a dragon, to complete the full set of apocalyptic calamities. The siege drags on for weeks. The Yellow Turbans, being a poorly equipped peasant army, have no great siege engines to threaten the massive walls of Luoyang, but they do not need them. They have a more powerful weapon time, and the plague that is still raging within your walls. They are content to wait, to let the hunger and the sickness do their work for them. Finally, the imperial court is forced to act. The powerful general-in-chief, He Jin, the brother of the empress, is given command of the imperial armies. He is ordered to break the siege and destroy the rebellion. From your vantage point on the city walls, you witness the great battle. It is a collision of two different worlds. The disciplined, ironclad, professional legions of the Han army march out of the western gate. They are met by the great, disorganized, but fanatically brave human wave of the Yellow Turban rebels. The battle is a slaughter. The peasants, armed with farm tools and religious fervor, are no match for the trained soldiers of the Empire. You watch as the Imperial cavalry charges into their ranks, as the disciplined infantry cuts them down. The great rebellion that was born of the plague is now being extinguished in blood at the foot of your walls. By evening, it is over. The Yellow Turban army is broken, scattered. The siege is lifted. A great, grim victory has been won. A few days later, the victorious army of General He Jin marches into the capital. It is not a parade of liberation. It is an occupation, the general. Now the undisputed savior of the dynasty is the most powerful man in China. He marches his legions into the heart of the city, and you understand immediately that the emperor, in his own palace, is now a prisoner. The eunuchs who once ruled the court are swiftly massacred by the general's troops. The old corrupt order has been swept away, but it has been replaced by a new order, the rule of the sword. You stand in your small office, looking at the bamboo slips that hold the stories of the plague, of the chaos, of the now crushed rebellion. You have survived. The city has survived. The dynasty has, technically, survived. But you know the truth. The Han dynasty is a ghost. The plague and the rebellion have shattered the authority of the central government forever, in crushing the Yellow Turban rebels. The court was forced to grant immense power to its generals. And those generals, men like He Jin, and others who are now rising in the provinces, will not be willing to give that power back. You have witnessed the great unraveling. You have seen how a single, invisible pestilence can create a crisis of faith. how that crisis can fuel a revolution, and how the suppression of that revolution can lead to the rise of military strongmen. The plague has set in motion a chain of events that will lead to the final. Bloody collapse of your dynasty and a century of civil war. The pestilence in the city is beginning to wane now, having burned through much of its fuel, but a new, more enduring, and far more human pestilence, the pestilence of warlordism, is just beginning. The victory over the Yellow Turban rebels outside the walls of Luoyang is not a celebration of restored order. It is the beginning of a new and more intimate kind of chaos. The general, Ha Jin, who saved the city, now controls it. The emperor, the son of heaven, is a guest in his own palace. The delicate balance of power between the throne, the court eunuchs, and the military has been shattered, and the sword now holds all the authority. You, from your small office in the Ministry of Rights, are a witness to the final. Violent death throes of the Han dynasty, the city, which had been united in its fear of the two plagues of sickness and rebellion, now fractures into a dozen warring factions within its own walls. The political situation descends into a brutal and bloody farce. General He Jin, in his attempt to consolidate his power, plots to massacre the powerful court eunuchs. The eunuchs discover the plot and, in a preemptive strike, assassinate the general within the walls of the imperial palace itself. In response, the general's loyal officers, led by a man named Yuan Shao, unleash their troops on the palace. You huddle in your small room as the capital city of the world's greatest empire consumes itself. You hear the screams from the palace as the soldiers carry out a great, indiscriminate slaughter of every eunuch they can find. The order and harmony you once cherished, the Confucian ideals of propriety and ritual, have been replaced by the simple, brutal logic of revenge. But the chaos is not over. In the midst of this power vacuum, a new and even more terrible player arrives. The warlord Dong Zhuo, a ruthless and ambitious general who had been summoned to the capital to help deal with the eunuchs, now marches his own powerful army into the city. He arrives not as a savior, but as an opportunist, a wolf drawn to the scent of a dying dynasty. Dong Zhuo seizes control of the capital. He deposes the young emperor and installs an even younger puppet, a mere child, on the dragon throne. The Han dynasty, which has ruled for 400 years, is now the personal plaything of a brutal warlord. Luoyang, the magnificent capital, becomes a city of terror under Dong Zhuo's rule. But his grip on power is not secure. The other great generals and governors of the empire, men like Yuan Shao and the brilliant strategist Cao Cao, refuse to recognize his authority. They form a great coalition and they march on Luoyang. And so, you find yourself in a city under siege once more. But this time, the enemy outside is not a peasant army. It is the disciplined, professional legions of the Han Empire itself. Now at war with each other, Dong Zhuo, seeing that he cannot hold the capital against the combined might of the other warlords, makes a decision of such monstrous, nihilistic cruelty that it will be remembered for 1,000 years. He decides that if he cannot have Luoyang, no one can. He orders the city to be abandoned, and he orders it to be burned to the ground. You are now a refugee, forced into a great, tragic exodus. The entire imperial court, the tens of thousands of civil servants, and the hundreds of thousands of citizens of Luoyang are forced to march west, to the old, ruined capital of Chang'an. It is a forced relocation on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. The Great March to Chang'an is a new kind of hell. It is a journey of hundreds of miles, on foot. For a population already weakened by years of plague and famine, there are no supplies, no organization. It is a death march. You walk with your fellow bureaucrats, your silk robes now tattered and stained, your precious books abandoned. You see people collapse and die on the road from exhaustion and hunger. And as you look back, you see a great column of black smoke rising on the horizon. Dong Zhuo's soldiers are being true to their master's command. They are systematically burning Luoyang, They burn the magnificent palaces, the great ministry buildings, the bustling markets, and they burn the imperial library, the greatest repository of knowledge in your world. Destroying centuries of history, of philosophy, of poetry, in a single, ignorant act of spite, you have survived the plague, you have survived the rebellion, and now you have survived the destruction of your own capital. You are a survivor of a civilization that is committing suicide. You arrive in the new capital of Chang'an, a city of ghosts, and you find that you have only exchanged one form of chaos for another. The great warlords have fractured the empire into a dozen warring kingdoms. The concept of a unified Han Empire is now just a memory. This is the beginning of the end, the period of chaos that will lead to the famous Three Kingdoms era. Your old life as a quiet, stable bureaucrat is gone forever. You are now a wanderer in a broken land. You travel from one warlord's court to another, trying to sell your skills as a scribe and an administrator, trying to find a patron who can offer some small island of stability in a sea of war. And everywhere you go, the old enemy, the pestilence, is still at work. The great centralized public health response of the Han, with its isolation centers and its imperial physicians, has vanished now. The plague rages unchecked. The constant movement of the warlords' armies, the great displaced populations of refugees, creates the perfect conditions for the disease to burn continuously. It has become an endemic, chronic feature of your broken world. You see the same scenes of horror you once read about in your reports, but now they are everywhere. Villages where the dead outnumber the living. Fields of ripe grain left to rot for want of hands to harvest it. A land filled with hungry orphans and desperate bandits. You are in the camp of a northern warlord, a man who is preparing for a great battle against a rival. You watch his army, and you see the sickness moving through his ranks. The men are feverish, weak. It is the same pestilence. The general's physicians are trying to combat it with the same herbal teas that Lord Tan once brewed in Luoyang. You realize that the medical knowledge born of the Great Plague, the work of men like Zhang Zhongjing, has survived the collapse of the dynasty that sponsored it. The empire is dead, but the desperate fight to understand and to heal continues. You think back on the great debate about the cause of the Han's fall. What was the point of no return? Was it the corruption of the eunuchs? Was it the Yellow Turban Rebellion? Was it the rise of the warlords? But you, who have lived through it all, know the truth. You know the great, secret history of your time. You know that the true cause was the invisible one, the pestilence. The plagues were the great, underlying weakness that made all the other political failures inevitable. The plagues killed the farmers and created the famines. The plagues fueled the apocalyptic faith of the rebels. The plagues shattered the people's belief in the mandate of heaven. And the plagues weakened the armies, allowing the warlords to rise. The eunuchs, the rebels, the generals. They were all just symptoms of the true disease. The pestilence was the great engine of destruction that brought the mighty Han dynasty crashing to the ground. You find temporary refuge in a small, quiet provincial town. A town that has so far been spared the worst of the wars. You are tired. You are a man who has seen too much history. You go to a local physician to get a remedy for a simple cough. He is an old man, and his small office is filled with the familiar earthy smell of dried herbs. He examines you, he feels your pulse, and he prepares a bitter tea for you as he works. You see a small, worn bundle of bamboo slips on his desk. It is a copy of Zhang Zhongjing's Shanghan Lun on cold damage, the great medical text born from the first wave of the Great Plagues. You look at the text, at the carefully painted characters describing the diagnosis and treatment of fevers, and you feel a strange sense of continuity, of a thread of knowledge that has survived the utter destruction of the world you once knew. The empire is gone. The capital is a smoking ruin. The world is ruled by fire and by the sword. But here, in this quiet, dusty room, a man is still trying to understand a fever. He is still trying to heal a sickness. The work continues. The knowledge has survived. And that, you think, is its own small, and perhaps sufficient, kind of hope. The great civil wars that tore the empire apart. The wars of the Three Kingdoms eventually burned themselves out. The great warlords Cao Cao, Liu Bei, Sun Quan, who were the protagonists of that bloody epic, are now long dead. Figures of history and legend. A new dynasty, the Jin, has risen. And a fragile, exhausted peace has settled over the fractured land. You are an old man now. You have survived it all. You have survived the plagues, the Yellow Turban Rebellion, the burning of the capital, the fall of the Han, and the endless wars of the warlords who followed. You have lived in a dozen different cities, served a half-dozen different masters. You have been a scribe, a refugee, an administrator, a wanderer. You are a living testament to the most catastrophic century in your people's history. And now, in the twilight of your own life, you decide to make one last journey. You decide to go home. You will walk the roads of your youth and return to your home province, to the village where you were born, to see what has become of the world you left behind so long ago. The journey is a pilgrimage through a land of ghosts. The great imperial roads of the Han are still there, their stone foundations a testament to the engineering genius of the fallen dynasty. But they are empty. You walk for days at a time without seeing another traveler. The bustling post stations, the feuding, where couriers once changed horses and merchants rested for the night, are now crumbling, roofless ruins, their courtyards overgrown with weeds. You walk through the great agricultural plains of central China. You remember this land from your youth, from the reports you read? It was a vast, intricate patchwork of carefully tended fields, of villages so numerous they were never more than a few miles apart. It was one of the most densely populated regions on Earth. Now it is empty. You walk past vast tracts of what was once fertile farmland, now gone wild. The irrigation canals are choked with silt. The rice paddies have reverted to marshland. You see the faint, ghostly outlines of old fields under a blanket of new. Wild growth. The land is healing itself, erasing the memory of the millions of people who once worked it, and you walk through the empty villages. This is the most haunting sight of all. You come to a place that you know was once a thriving market town of several thousand people, and there's nothing there but silence. The houses are still standing, their timber frames weathered and gray, their tiled roofs collapsing. Doors hang open on rusted hinges. You walk down the main street, your footsteps echoing unnervingly. You look into the empty homes. You see a broken pot, a child's simple wooden toy lying in the dust, a loom with a piece of half-finished, rotted cloth still threaded upon it. Each house is a tiny, silent museum of an interrupted life. You are witnessing the full, terrible scale of the demographic collapse that you once tracked on your bamboo slips. The plagues of the late Han, followed by a century of warfare and famine, have done their work. The population of your world has been reduced by a staggering amount. Future historians, looking at the few remaining census records, will estimate that the population of China fell from a high of nearly 60 million during the peak of the Han to perhaps as low as 15 or 20 million. You do not need to see the numbers. You see the truth in the silent, empty villages. You are walking through a land that has lost more than half of its people. One day, you find a single family living in an otherwise deserted village. They are squatters, living in what was once the magistrate's house. They look at you with the suspicious, fearful eyes of wild animals. They tell you they are the only people left for 30 miles in any direction. They survive by farming a small plot of land and by hunting in the overgrown forests that were once farmland. They are living in the ruins of a great civilization. Their lives as hard and as isolated as those of the earliest prehistoric men. You pass a great, ruined Buddhist monastery. Its temples, once filled with chanting monks and the smell of incense, are now roofless shells, You think of the new religion that had been spreading so rapidly during the last days of the Han. You wonder if the people decided that the Buddha was no more effective at stopping the pestilence than the emperor had been. As you get closer to your own home province, you think about the great debate that consumed your youth. Was the fall of the Han a political failure? A result of the corruption of the court and the rise of the warlords? Or was it a result of the famines and the plagues? A great, unavoidable natural disaster. You, the old man who has seen it all, know that the question itself is meaningless. The two were one and the same. The plagues created the social despair that fueled the rebellions. The rebellions created the political chaos that allowed the warlords to rise. The wars of the warlords spread the plagues further and destroyed the land, creating more famine. It was a great, vicious, and unbreakable cycle of death. A feedback loop of catastrophe that fed on itself for 100 years until the empire was simply gone. Finally, after months of walking, you arrive at the valley of your own home village, the place where your story began. It is empty. It is just another ghost town, no different from the dozens of others you have passed through. You find the place where your own family's house once stood. There is nothing there but a pile of stones and a few rotted timbers. Already being consumed by the green tide of nature, you stand in the ruin of your own childhood. You are the last one. Your family, your neighbors, your entire world. They are all gone. Taken by the fevers, by the wars, by the long, slow grind of a century of misery. You walk to the small stream where you once played as a boy. You sit on a stone. The only sound is the gentle murmur of the water and the wind in the long grass. You are an old man, at the end of your life, sitting in the quiet wreckage of your own past. You have seen the beginning of the great unraveling on a single, insignificant bamboo slip in a quiet office in a city that no longer exists. And you have now seen its final, silent result. A land of empty cottages, a world of ghosts. You spend one last night in your ruined village, sleeping under the stars. In the morning, you make a decision. There is nothing for you here but memory, and your memories are too heavy to carry alone. You are a scribe. Your purpose has always been the written word. You have one last duty to perform. You will find a quiet place, a small monastery perhaps, a place with ink and brushes and silk, and you will write it all down. You will write the story of your time. You will tell of the great Han Dynasty, and of the pestilence that brought it to its knees. You will record the names of the physicians and the emperors, the rebels and the generals. You will tell the truth of it, the truth that only you, the quiet, anonymous bureaucrat who read the reports and survived the fallout. Now no, you will create a new set of bamboo slips, a new record. Not a record of taxes or of harvests, but a record of a great dying, so that the world of the future will not forget. So that they will know how even the greatest and most powerful of empires can be brought to ruin by an enemy that is entirely invisible. Your journey back to the coast, back towards the sea, is a journey without a destination. It is simply a turning away from a past that is too full of ghosts to bear. But you are an old man. The fire of youth that might have propelled you across the great ocean is gone, replaced by a deep, quiet weariness. You do not make it to a port city, instead. You find your final harbor in a small, quiet Buddhist monastery, nestled high in a mountain valley that has been mercifully spared the worst of the wars and the pestilence. You trade your last remaining possession, your skill as a scholar and a scribe, for a place of refuge. The old abbot, a man whose face is a mask of serene compassion, accepts your offer. He gives you a small, clean cell to live in, a simple robe to wear, and a daily bowl of rice gruel. In exchange, you will help the monastery by copying their sacred texts, their sutras, and so, your life comes full circle. You are once again a man of ink and brushes and the quiet, rhythmic work of the written word. But you are not the same proud, confident young official who once worked in the great ministry in Luoyang. You are a man who has seen the utter collapse of the world he once believed to be eternal. The monastery is a place of profound and healing peace. The only sounds are the chanting of the monks, the whisper of the wind in the pine trees, and the occasional distant toll of a temple bell. Here, in this quiet sanctuary, you finally have the time and the distance to make sense of the great, chaotic, and terrible story you have lived through. The abbot gives you a gift, a supply of rough, but serviceable, paper and a new set of brushes and an inkstone. He sees that you have a story within you that must be written, a ghost that must be exorcised onto the page, and so you begin your final, and most important, work. You decide that you will write a history, not the official, laudatory history that a new dynasty will one day write about the fall of the Han, a history that will speak only of corrupt emperors and righteous rebellions. You will write the secret history. You will write the history that you saw from your small desk, the history that was written on bamboo slips and in the death ledgers. You will write the history of the great pestilence, your small. Bare cell becomes your scriptorium, by the light of a simple oil lamp. You begin to write, and as you write, you relive your own long journey. You write of the magnificent, orderly world of the Han capital, of your own youthful pride in the power and permanence of the empire. You describe the great palaces, the bustling markets, the complex and seemingly perfect bureaucracy. You write of the first innocuous report, the single bamboo slip from a southern province with its casual mention of a seasonal affliction. You remember the feeling of reading it, a moment of complete and utter ignorance of the storm that was gathering on the horizon. You write of the emperor's grand, useless rituals at the altar of heaven, of the slaughtered oxen and the burned silk. You write of the court's desperate attempt to bargain with a cosmos that was not listening. You write of the physicians, of your old master, Lord Tan. You write of their elegant, complex theories of pestilential qi, of their bitter herbal teas and their fine bronze needles. You write of their confidence, and of their ultimate, tragic failure in the face of a biological reality they could not comprehend. You write of the isolation centers, the Li Chuyuan, the great, desperate, and ultimately futile attempt to build a wall between the sick and the healthy. You remember the faces of the families being torn apart, the wails of the children being carried away. You write of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, of the great, angry tide of desperate peasants who saw the plague as a sign that heaven itself had sanctioned their revolution. You write of the siege of your own capital, of the city consuming itself from within. Even as the rebels raged without, you write of the fall of the Han, of the rise of the warlords, of the burning of Luoyang, of your own long, wandering years through a fractured and bleeding land. You remember the empty villages, the fallow fields, the profound, haunting silence of a depopulated world. You write not just of the great events, but of the small, human details. You write of the smell of the sickness. You write of the sound of the dead carts on the cobblestones. You write of the look in a mother's eyes as she watches her child die. Your history is not a grand, sweeping narrative of heroes and villains. It is a quiet, detailed, and deeply sad accounting of a civilization's collapse. And at the heart of your history is your great argument. The central truth that you have learned over a lifetime of suffering. Future historians, will focus on the men. They will write of the weak emperors, the corrupt eunuchs, the ambitious generals. They will build a great, complex narrative of political failure, of social unrest, of military conquest. But they will be missing the main character of the story, the true protagonist of the fall of the Han Dynasty. You write, was not a man, it was the pestilence itself. The plague was the great, impersonal, and unstoppable engine of history. It was the plague that caused the famines, It was the plague that fueled the rebellion. It was the plague that shattered the mandate of heaven. The warlords who came after did not conquer an empire. They were merely scavengers, picking over a corpse that the pestilence had already killed. You write for months, for years. Your hair grows whiter, your hand, once so steady with the brush, now begins to tremble. Your eyes, which have seen so much, begin to fail you. Finally, one day, the work is done. You have filled hundreds of sheets of paper with your small, neat, and precise script. You have told the whole story. You have borne witness. You take the stack of papers, your final testament, and you place it in a simple wooden box. You do not know if anyone will ever read it. Perhaps it will be lost or burned in some future war. But that does not matter. The act of writing it, of remembering, has been its own kind of salvation. It has given a shape, a meaning to a lifetime of chaos and suffering. You are a very old man now. Your long journey is at its end. You walk out of your small cell and into the monastery's quiet, sun-drenched courtyard. You look up at the great, silent, and eternal peaks of the mountains that surround you. You have seen an empire die. You have seen a world end. And you have survived to tell the tale. The miserable task is finished, and you are, at last, at peace. The old scholar sets down his brush. The long, bitter history is finally written. The ghosts of the Han Dynasty, the memory of the fever and the famine, of the warlords and the rebellions, are now at rest, contained in the quiet. Orderly characters on the page. His work is done. His duty to the past is fulfilled. And now, he can rest. Let the image of him, an old man at peace in his quiet mountain monastery, now begin to fade, dissolving into the gentle mists of time. Your own journey of the night is also coming to its gentle close. Leave the ancient world of China behind. Leave the grand palaces and the silent, empty villages. Return to the familiar comfort and safety of your own room, a world away from the great, impersonal tides of history. Feel the quiet of the present moment surround you like a warm blanket. The only rhythm is the slow, steady, and easy rhythm of your own breathing. With each breath, feel the last of the day's tensions drift away. Your mind, which has traveled through such a long and sorrowful story, can now be still. The history is over. The lesson is learned. All that is left is the deep, healing, and profound peace of the approaching night. The darkness is a welcome friend, a quiet harbor after a long voyage. There are no more stories to tell, no more ghosts to confront. There is only the simple, gentle act of letting go. Allow yourself to drift on the slow, easy current of sleep, to be carried away to a place of silent, dreamless, and restorative peace. The long day is over. Your own history can wait until tomorrow. Rest now.